be transparent.
Eventually it becomes cobalt blue, and then the lights go out. That's when the light show begins.
You're looking out the window and all you see are these stars that go by, which are the bioluminescent organisms.
You're starting to see sparks. It's like the sparks that come off a campfire.
It's really the only sense that you have that you're sinking, is looking out the viewport and seeing the bioluminescent particles streaming past you.
I came upon an animal that we know as a siphonophore. Ultimately, it turned out to be 40 meters long. That's longer than a blue whale is. These animals have long tentacles that they hang down below their bodies, and they entangle anything that swims into the tentacles.
Ctenophores are spectacular organisms to look at. When light hits them, they reflect rainbow color.
You might see viperfish, and this is an absolute Christmas tree of a fish. Everything on this fish can light up. Bioluminescence may be the most common form of communication on the planet, and yet we know so little about it.
Once you get down below the depth where sunlight penetrates, everything changes dramatically.
When you go down into deep water, the most characteristic things are the jellies. Everywhere you look, you see these jellies, and a lot of the luminescence that you see when the sub's lights are turned off are these jellies lighting up.
I remember the first time I saw the Dumbo octopus.
These have a pair of fins on the sides of their bodies. They flap these fins, and that's why they refer to them as Dumbos. Vampire squids have really, really dark pigment, and in between all of their arms they have a web.
It's an extraordinary animal, about the size of a football, with beautiful blue opalescent eyes.
The approach to the bottom is really, in my mind, one of the most wondrous things, because you're, of course, as a scientist who works on organisms that live on the bottom, you're anxious to see them.
To see the bottom of the ocean with my own eyes. And it wasn't at all what I expected.
The landscape down there is as dramatic as anything in a national park.
It just blows you away because it's so reminiscent of coming down onto a lunar landscape.
And there's nothing there, it's just a desert. It looks like a thin mud covering the bottom.
All of a sudden the lights come on, you just hear this click. And all of the bright lights of the submersible come on and you can see the seafloor.
This whole world opens up in front of you. Fish swimming around, and eels and crustaceans.
Here you are, sitting on the bottom of the ocean with 2 miles of water over your head, and you're sitting amongst a bunch of animals that you read about in the literature, and you'd hope to get your hands on, and there they are in front of you.
Imagine the bottom of the deep, dark ocean, really cold, way out offshore, and all of a sudden, a large whale just falls to the bottom. This is a whale that has died. And there is this wonderful feast of food for other organisms on the ocean floor.
You've got a 50-foot whale falling down to the bottom, and in 2 years it's gone? What happened? Who's down there eating it?
The first things that come in are the large scavengers, some 6-gill sharks. There'll be hagfish, these slimy, worm-like fish that have no real jaws, but they just rasp their way through the tissues. Then the crabs come in, and the crabs start ripping and tearing pieces of tissue. And then the very tiny little things like we call amphipods, which look for all intents and purposes like a miniature shrimp. And they come in by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, and just literally sit there and scrape away the tissues until we have very little tissue left but exposed bones. But that's not the end. Those bones themselves are a food source for yet a whole other group of organisms.
These whale falls are really phenomenal because organisms will come in and the community structure will change over a period of time, and it provides a brand new system or ecosystem for scientists to study in the deep sea.
Deep sea exploration is one of the most challenging fields that I know of. It's physically challenging and it's intellectually challenging. It is the most fun I think you can have that's legal.
I have to stop and remind myself where I am, that I am in a special place that most people don't get to go to. It's a very privileged thing.
We barely scratch the surface in understanding what's going on out there. This is a huge, huge challenge to all of humankind. And yet, just a few of us have been lucky enough to be able to enter this habitat and to study it.
Our own planet is essentially unexplored. We know very, very little about what lives in the open waters of the deep sea.